And let's think about this too. The daughter wanting to raise her dad's, status, elevation, to bring honor. I mean, she's royalty and she's bringing honor to her father.
Yeah.
By doing this as well, I think that's also a factor.
Yep.
This is my father, I'm royalty, and our duties were a lot different back then.
Yeah.
Your duty to marry, your duty to some of them to learn to give
especially
themselves
being a
to
woman
the church.
back then, they unfortunately they were almost used as a token, and that's all.
They were essential, though.
Part. They were
so essential because
things.
how old is the game of chess?
Yes.
And that queen is still foundational.
Foundationally, the strongest player.
And people always talk about how the king, he's useless. He can only have one move. The king only needs one move at a time. He's hugely significant. But the queen, your partner, they're putting in work.
Yeah.
They have to. That's their job. You do marry someone that helps you. You don't want to marry someone that you're constantly taking care of.
Exactly.
Right? And so the king bears the responsibility that if you fall, it's done. All these other people can fall. But the queen, when she's off the board, that's the main piece you try to get off the board.
Yeah.
You sacrifice everyone else to get rid of that queen.
Yeah.
Because the king, the king is so much weaker without its queen.
Yeah.
The child doesn't play the same role as the queen. Their duties are a little bit easier to change, right? And so I just like to look at it through that one.
No, that's a great perspective, I think. It's spot on.
Hey everybody, welcome into Folklore and Flourish. You're here with Jane and Mark over at Blue Box 29. Today is March 23rd. We are in the final week of March. Today is all about the sacrifice. So we knew that today was coming. We knew it was going to be a pretty big cost that is paid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what our theme is today, is the cost that's paid, the sacrifice, the intention behind it, and what those sacrifices are like. So we're going to see that through 4 different stories today. We're going to see it through Christian, Norse, Greek, and Aztec folklore today. So we will see you after these 4 stories all about the sacrifice. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1, Christ and the Weight of Sacrifice. In the final days before crucifixion, the story of Jesus Christ becomes not one of miracles or teaching, but of choice under pressure, where the full weight of purpose is no longer distant, but immediate, unavoidable, and deeply human. As he enters Jerusalem, knowing that the path ahead leads not to triumph in the way others expect, but to suffering, rejection, and death, and though he is followed by crowds who see him as a savior, a king, a figure of hope, the reality of what must happen begins to narrow around him, becoming personal, intimate, and costly. In the quiet of the Garden of Gethsemane, away from the noise of the city, he withdraws to pray not as one untouched by fear, but as one fully aware of what is coming. And in that moment, the story reveals something essential. The sacrifice is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of it. As he asks, If it is possible, let this cup pass from me, expressing a deeply human desire to avoid pain, yet follows it with a greater alignment. Not my will, but yours be done, showing that true sacrifice is not forced, but chosen, even when every part of the self understands the cost. Soon after he is betrayed by Judas, one of his own disciples, handed over not by enemies from afar, but by someone who had walked beside him. And this betrayal deepens the moment, revealing that sacrifice often includes not only suffering, but abandonment, misunderstanding, and the collapse of trust. And as he is arrested, questioned, and brought before authorities, he does not resist in the way many expect. He does not call down power or escape the situation, but moves through it with a quiet resolve that is not rooted in passivity, but in purpose. He is mocked, beaten, and ultimately led to the place of crucifixion, carrying the cross through the streets, a physical representation of the burden he has chosen to bear. And as he is nailed to it, lifted between earth and sky, the moment reaches its fullest expression, not as a display of defeat, but as the completion of something that was always meant to be fulfilled. And even in that place of extreme suffering, his words do not turn to anger, but to forgiveness. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, revealing that sacrifice, at its highest form, is not only about enduring pain, but about transforming it. Those who witness the moment see different things. Some see failure, others see injustice, and some begin to understand that something deeper is unfolding, that this is not the end of the story, but a turning point that will redefine meaning itself. And in the stillness that follows, the cost is undeniable, for sacrifice always leaves something behind, something given, something lost, something that cannot be reclaimed. Yet within that loss, something else emerges, a shift, a new understanding, a transformation that could not have existed without the costs that preceded it. This story is not told to glorify suffering, but to reveal that purpose, when fully lived, often demands more than comfort can sustain. That there are moments where one must choose alignment over ease, truth over avoidance, and meaning over preservation. And in those moments, sacrifice becomes not an end, but a passage, a movement through loss into something that carries greater weight, greater depth, and greater impact than what existed before. Story 2: Odin and the Sacrifice for Wisdom. In the vast and layered world of Norse mythology, where knowledge is not freely given, but earned through endurance and cost, there stands a story that defines sacrifice not as loss alone, but as transformation. And at the center of it is Odin, the All-Father, a god not only of war and kingship, but of wisdom, poetry, and the unseen forces that shape reality. And unlike many rulers who rely solely on strength, Odin is driven by a deeper hunger, a need to understand the hidden structures of existence, the forces beneath fate, the patterns that govern life and death. And this pursuit leads him to a realization that knowledge cannot be taken. It must be paid for. Long before the moment of his greatest sacrifice, Odin had already given part of himself in exchange for insight, offering one of his eyes at the well of Mimir to drink from its waters of wisdom, gaining vision beyond ordinary sight. Yet even this was not enough, for there remained a deeper knowledge, one that could not be assessed through exchange alone, but through surrender. And so Odin turns to the great world tree, Yggdrasil, a vast cosmic structure that connects all realms, roots stretching into the underworld, branches reaching into the heavens, a living access of existence itself. There, Odin makes a choice that sets this story apart. He does not seek assistance. He does not ask another to bear the burden. He chooses to sacrifice himself to himself, a paradox that reflects the nature of true transformation. For he hangs upon Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, without food, without drink, suspended between life and death, between knowing and unknowing. And in this state, he does not simply endure pain, he enters a threshold, a place where identity dissolves and perception shifts, where the boundaries between self and reality begin to blur. As the nights pass, the experience deepens, and what emerges is not immediate clarity, but struggle. For the knowledge he seeks is not surface-level understanding, but something more primal, more foundational, and in that depth, he encounters the runes, ancient symbols of power, language, and meaning, not invented, but revealed, rising up from the fabric of existence itself. And in grasping them, Odin gains more than information. He gains access, the ability to shape, to influence, to understand the forces that move beneath the visible world. When he finally releases from the tree, he is not the same as he was before, for sacrifice has altered him, not just in what he has gained, but in what he has given. And this is the essence of the story, that true wisdom is not acquired without cost, that deeper understanding requires the willingness to let go of comfort, identity, and even certainty, and that the most profound transformations often occur in moments where one is suspended between what was and what will be. Odin's sacrifice is not framed as heroic in the traditional sense. There is no audience, no immediate reward, no recognition. It is solitary, internal, and deeply personal. And yet its impact extends beyond him, shaping the myths, the language, and the worldview of the Norse people, who saw in this story a reflection of their own understanding of life. That struggle is not separate from growth, that pain is not meaningless when it leads to insight, and that sacrifice, when chosen with intention, becomes a bridge between limitation and possibility. In the end, Odin does not escape the cost of what he sought, but neither is he diminished by it. Instead, he becomes something more complete, not because he avoided suffering, but because he moved through it, and in doing so, reveals that the path to wisdom is not found in ease, but in the willingness to give something of oneself in exchange for truth. Story 3: Iphigenia and the Price of the Wind. Before the ships could sail to Troy, before the war could begin, before heroes could earn their names in battle, there came a moment where the entire expedition stood still, held not by enemies, but by something far more difficult to confront: the demand for sacrifice. And at the center of that moment was Iphigenia, daughter of Agamemnon, leader of the Greek forces. And though she was not a warrior, not a strategist, not a figure seeking glory, her story would become one of the most profound reflections on cost within Greek mythology. For the fleet, gathered at Aulis, could not depart. The winds had ceased, the sea lay still, and the army waited, unable to move forward toward its purpose. And it was revealed that this stillness was not random, but the result of divine displeasure. For the goddess Artemis had been offended, and in response she withheld the winds, creating a barrier that could not be overcome through strength or strategy alone. The solution, as delivered by prophecy, was as clear as it was devastating. Agamemnon must sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia, to appease the goddess and restore the winds. And in that moment, the story shifts from one of war to one of decision. For Agamemnon is faced not with an enemy, but with a choice that reveals the tension between duty and love, between leadership and humanity. And though he hesitates, though he struggles with the weight of what is being asked, the pressure of the army, the expectation of success, and the belief in destiny close in around him, leaving him with a path that demands more than he is prepared to give. Iphigenia is brought to Aulis under the pretense of marriage, unaware at first of what awaits her. And when the truth is revealed, the story reaches its most human point, for she is no longer an abstract offering, but a person faced with the reality of her own fate. And in different tellings of the myth, her response varies, but one version stands out, not because it softens the moment, but because it deepens it, in which Iphigenia, upon understanding what is required, chooses to accept her role, not out of blind obedience, but out of recognition, seeing that her sacrifice is tied to something larger than herself, that her life in this moment becomes the cost of movement, the price of purpose. And though this choice does not remove the tragedy, it transforms it, shifting it from something taken to something given. As the ritual unfolds, as the moment approaches its final point, the tension between what is personal and what is collective becomes fully visible. For the army awaits, the ships remain still, and the outcome of this single act will determine whether the entire force moves forward or remains forever suspended. And in some versions of the myth, Artemis intervenes at the final moment, replacing Iphigenia with a deer and carrying her away, while in others, the sacrifice is completed, and the winds return, allowing the fleet to sail. But regardless of the ending, the core of the story remains unchanged, that there are moments where movement requires cost, where progress is tied to loss, and where the path forward demands something that cannot be easily justified or undone. Iphigenia's story does not offer comfort, nor does it resolve neatly into right or wrong. Instead, it reveals the complexity of sacrifice, the way it exists at the intersection of necessity and tragedy, and the way it forces those involved to confront what they value most. For Agamemnon must live with the consequence of his decision, and Iphigenia becomes a symbol not of weakness, but of the profound weight carried by those whose lives become part of something larger than themselves. In the end, the winds return, the ships do sail, and the war does begin. But the cost of that movement is never forgotten. Embedded within the story is a reminder that purpose is not always clean, that progress is not always free, and that sacrifice, when it comes, changes everything it touches. Story 4: Tlawi's Kalpan Tekutli and the Offering of Blood. In the cosmology of the Mexica people, the world was not sustained by chance or passive existence, but by a constant exchange between the human and the divine, a cycle of giving and receiving in which life itself was understood as something that required nourishment, not only in the physical sense, but in the spiritual. And at the center of this understanding stood powerful deities whose roles shaped the balance of existence. Among them, Tlawi's Kalpa Tekutli, the god of the morning star, often associated with the planet Venus, a figure of both light and danger, of renewal and conflict, whose presence marked transition between darkness and day. In Aztec belief, the sun did not rise automatically, nor did the world continue without effort. It required energy, intention, and sacrifice, for the gods themselves had once given of their own essence to set creation in motion, and in return, humanity was called to participate in that ongoing cycle, offering something back to sustain what had been given, and this was not seen as cruelty or imbalance, but as necessity, a reflection of the belief that existence is maintained through reciprocity, that nothing continues without contribution. Rituals are performed to honor this understanding, ceremonies in which offerings were made, sometimes of food, sometimes of symbolic items, and at times of blood, representing life force itself. And these acts were not carried out in secrecy or shame, but in structured, intentional ways, guided by priests and leaders who understood their role as intermediaries between worlds, ensuring that the balance remained intact. Tlawi's Kalpa Tekutli, as the morning star, carried a dual nature, bringing light, yet also associated with warfare and the piercing force of dawn, a reminder that renewal is not always gentle, that beginnings often emerge through disruption, and that the transition from darkness to light can carry its own intensity, its own cost. In stories and interpretations of this deity, there is an understanding that the energy that sustains life is not passive, it is active, requiring engagement, participation, and at times sacrifice. And this extends beyond ritual into the broader world view, where individuals are seen as part of a larger system, their actions contributing to the continuation of the world itself. The concept of sacrifice within this tradition is often misunderstood when viewed outside of its context. But within the Mexica perspective, it is not about loss for its own sake. It is about alignment, about recognizing that life is not separate from responsibility, that to receive existence is also to give back to it, and that the balance between these forces is what allows the world to continue. In this way, the story of Tlawi's Kalpa Tikutli becomes not just about a single deity, but about a way of understanding existence, where light is earned, where cycles are maintained through participation, and where the cost of continuation is acknowledged rather than ignored. And though the forms of sacrifice in this culture are specific to its time and belief system, the underlying principle remains. That meaning deepens when something is given, that purpose is strengthened when it requires commitment, and that the act of offering, in whatever form it takes, transforms both the one who gives and the world they are a part of. This story does not ask whether sacrifice should exist, but what it means to give, what it means to sustain, and what it means to be a part of something larger than oneself, where existence is not simply experienced, but upheld through conscious participation. Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed those 4 stories of the sacrifice. As you can tell, it wasn't the gory about the death and Yeah, as we've heard and seen in a lot of these stories, these 4 things, it wasn't a nice, easy, seamless death, or no, it wasn't painless. It was brutal. Every single one of these stories, from the choice to the action itself to that suspension, it's all painful. It's all painful, and it's important to with these 4 stories, and I think it is important to say this, is having that intention, having that purpose, it won't lighten the pain. It won't take away from the loss, but it gives you something to move forward. And if you place that intention, it's more of the harmony and the understanding with the world. And I mean, that's pretty big with the Aztec stuff. We see that in different movies and stories, and it's totally brutal. Like it's a game and it's a sport. No, it was a very sacred ritual, right? It wasn't just, oh, you're enemies, so we're gonna kill you and slaughter you, and there's blood soaking everywhere. It was very precise. Like there was meaning. It wasn't barbarians,
Mhm.
just killing each other for sport. And so that's kind of just something I wanted to say before we started the 4. But the Christian story, right? We know through Christianity worldwide, the greatest sacrifice ever given was God giving his beloved son,
Right.
one of the 3 in the sacred triad, to us, right?
Mhm.
He gave him to us, and he came and experienced. He lived for 33 years, I believe, and he was the sacrifice for all of us. Like even today, that's the belief in Christianity, is that he did that sacrifice thinking of you, like Mark, right?
Mhm.
Mark Nelson, he's someone I'm sacrificing for. Jane Murdoch, right? I'm sacrificing for her. It wasn't the people there, the brutality there. It wasn't just forgiveness of the people doing this.
Mhm.
It was forgiveness of every single thing that
Soul.
will happen to come.
Yeah.
And it was going just, I have to believe that this is worth it. And he did. And it wasn't that he didn't question it. I mean, he's hanging on that cross too, going, God, why have you forsaken me?
Mhm.
Why are you letting me suffer? It's the very beginning of it's so much bigger than you. Because this is eternity. And I don't believe that it's this Father in heaven that's looking down and not suffering too.
Right.
And I think the most beautiful way to put it is how it was put in the movie The Shack. What's her name? That actress, Octavia Spencer or something. She's an amazing actress. I believe that's her name. But when she's playing God, the Father portion,
Right.
and she shows the scars on her wrists and says, as humans, you misunderstand the mystery. Like I was there. I hung on that cross. And that very movie is why I believe that when we're dying, regardless of the circumstance and how terrible it may be, I truly believe that God is in there with us. That peace that people feel when you should be in serious pain, I think that's God. I think he's feeling the pain for us and is just like welcoming us home. But I truly believe that he hung on that cross with his son.
I mean, that just reinforces my belief that I say where I believe we are all a piece of God experiencing the universe
Absolutely.
and everything because it totally explains that. Like if we are all God, a piece of God, witnessing things, he lives inside of us. That explains it because he'll bear every scar, he'll witness every smile. Like if I were a god, if I created something, I would want to see, like when I played the game like The Sims or something, right? And I built it, I always wanted to see more, like Sim City or whatever. Like I always wanted to see more. Like I always wanted to go in more. Like I wanted to be able to go into the little city buildings and stuff. But it's just like that game was not designed like that.
Hmm.
But I always wanted it. I always wanted to win and be thriving. And I would always cheat and take off all the bad stuff because I didn't want my things to whatever. Like I wanted it to be awesome and grow and
Right.
thrive. So, but then just the way the game is set up, sometimes things happen. Well, so like that's just explaining what God is, right? Like he comes down, he, she, whatever it is, and experiences everything. It's just kind of amazing.
And takes away, I think, the parts that we can't handle. I don't think that it's just we don't feel the pain because he's trying to take us home. I think he's saying, let me do this because I'm the only one that can. And you're coming home. You don't need it anymore. This body isn't needed anymore, right? It's almost like he takes over this vessel and almost like carries our soul back out of it. And it's like, no, you're not a soul within the body. Your body is within your soul, your energy, your vibration. But let me, take the wheel right now. And I truly believe that is what the peace is. I don't think that there's any way that you could ever prove it. It's not something that can be proven. But I think it's beautiful to think that even on those cases when people are alone, they die and it's awful what happens to them. I think those moments, God is there too. I don't think that he's watching this evil and being like, no, it's okay. You'll be fine. I think he bears it too. And I think that that's a misconception with the mystery is he does understand what it felt like because he felt every cut, like every disrespectful thing that happened to you. And I think it's just that little piece of you aren't alone. I hope, I have to believe that because there's just so many terrible things that happen and people that are alone in those situations. And I hope that, a God and worth believing in would be there and go, I got you.
I
You aren't
believe
you aren't alone in this.
you aren't. I totally believe that there is that being, creation, whatever, because it is in us in this moment, in the next, in every good moment, in every bad moment. God is there within us. I 1,000,000% believe that.
Right?
In whatever style that you are watching, whatever your God is, I believe your God is within you no matter what. Like, it is, like, or your style of whatever your God is. What if you don't believe in God? What if you believe in the universe? Well, then the universe is inside of you too. It's the same thing. It's just terminology. That's all it is terminology. What better suits my beliefs? What feels good in my soul? What game am I playing? Some people like to play the game of life, and some people like to play the game of Monopoly, you know? So whatever game you're playing, I don't care what you call it, just play the game and have fun.
And so we see in story 2, the father portion, the all father, playing the game. He respects the reality and the mystery. And he knows his body is a vessel. There's nothing that he can do that this body will live forever. He sacrifices pieces of it, understanding that he doesn't need both eyes to see clearly. In fact, by taking one away, he was able to understand way more and see a lot more. Then and sacrifices himself on the tree to himself. That's the epitome of, Jesus did that for his God too, right?
Yeah.
And so we see Odin do that. He spears himself, and I'm pretty sure that happens during the crucifixion of
It
Christ.
100% does. I was going to bring that up.
So there's that symmetry within it. So, wow, maybe at one point the father did experience what that hanging would be like, that suspension. And it just makes it even more beautiful because then he knew what the pain was and willingly chose to suffer it again with his child. But in Odin's case, he's looking at how he can save humanity, the gods, Asgard, yeah, all of that being saved. But when Ragnarok comes, everything's destroyed. And so he's trying to figure that out. And he knows that something's coming. He doesn't know that there's life yet until he goes through this process and is told, your wisdom isn't for nothing. It ends with you. It will die with you. And he's okay with that.
Yeah.
Because his sacrifice will allow someone to avenge him and carry that into the new world. It will allow his wife to be reunited with her 2 boys. So while, yes, some other children are going to die, there's going to be major loss. Their sacrifice will not be in vain because evil will not win. He knows that life will come. And so there we see the All-Father, go, all right, what a better way to go than giving myself for all of these beings to have an opportunity to thrive without all of these bad guys here anymore, right? These destructive forces. They took a lot of that away so that we had a chance.
Yeah.
Because we as humans wouldn't stand a chance against that serpent, against Fenrir, against just Loki alone, right? Could control everyone. And Odin goes, we got a job to do, and this is the end. So, there's kind of that valor too of we're going to Valhalla though, because we're fighting till the end. And so I think that's kind of what his sacrifice is, more than just him being on the tree. It's the sacrifice of letting go of control, but also having to bear that knowledge and understanding that you can't control it anymore and you can't change it, but
I
you can
think
embrace it.
it's one of those things where he probably came to the realization, almost like maybe like the Buddha when he's under the fig tree.
Mhm.
When you get the symmetry between the tree thing, he was on it, Buddha was, under it, but all the symmetry of all these stories. But like him on the tree could have came to that what he knows was coming to end, because the cycle, this part of this game that they were playing, and he was already number one leveled up. There was no higher he could go. The
Mm-mm.
only way he could go higher is if this game ended and all these tokens went up. And then some pieces of it got to stay. But this game is over. So now let's go up. And now he gets to see this game from a whole different perspective
Mhm.
and play it in a whole different way.
And you see the echo of the number sequence. 9 worlds on the tree. 9 days he was suspended there. Thor had 9 final steps. So there is a beautiful echo of everything has meaning, everything has purpose. And so, yeah, that's just what I feel about with Odin. But then we go to the third story. And this one I had a hard time with every time I hear it, because her sacrifice is to go to war. The dad sacrifices her so that he can go to war and continue to conquer. Ultimately, he wants Troy. Troy's an untouchable prize. Agamemnon is greedy. You see Odysseus and Achilles constantly shaming him in other stories for his greed, for his arrogance, for his little know-how and his lack of action, but he'll sit on the throne and take everything. So we see that, and then we figure out that he was only able to go by choosing to sacrifice his child.
Yeah. He's pretty gross to me.
Yeah, I have, a lot of ew.
Yeah, I
This.
remember this story from before, though. We've heard this story
Mhm.
before, and I didn't like it then.
And she
Definitely,
believes
like,
it's necessary because
yeah,
if a united Greece, you have one place that's out of sorts, you have no idea what's going to happen, right? They might rise up against you and destroy your way of living, whatever it may be. And so if that's being pressed on her by the people and the soldiers and the pressure, I could see how she went, this is for my people. This is for Greece. This is for my culture.
yeah, and then taking the honor in it.
But then you hear the other side of these warriors going, he's not going to stop. Now we know why he wasn't going to stop. Agamemnon would have stayed there a lot longer than 10 years because he just made the ultimate sacrifice. He gave a child to appease the gods, and the gods are just like, and then you still go to Troy and half of the gods are on their side still against them. But I agree. I think this is where
That's why it's just a
humans
game
play
to
the
them.
sacrifice game sometimes, and it's out of nothing other than greed, fear, this superiority that, oh, well, I'm the only one that can make that sacrifice, which means that I am the king of kings. And then we saw earlier how Spartans made fun of the Persians because they were like the god kings. They thought themselves that high as well.
Right.
And so I don't know, I admire hearing the stories of these heroes going, you aren't shit. I'm not going to bow to you. And I love the movie 300 when King Leonidas is making fun of the Persian guy.
Right.
Of just like, I'm a little tired. I don't think I could kneel.
Yeah, he's like, oh, my knee. Oh,
You see,
I could totally see like that being not just because it was movie and dramatized, but I could see a warrior
with that Spartan culture, 1000%.
saying those exact things, being like, I can't because fuck up.
Because some 300 have killed how many of yours just right here?
Yeah,
I'm not bound to anyone.
exactly.
And it's bad enough that you called me here to ask me to stay alive. That changes perspective.
Mm,
Because if you're offering deals, you're acknowledging that you've hit a wall with them. So all these people and all these movies and stories, I'll offer you survival if you surrender. They never will. That's their final way to try to get you, is surrender yourself and who you are and all your people, and it'll be fine. No, you're going to be slaves. What?
mm,
Doesn't matter. That's always how it works out. World War II. Surrender all your stuff, right? They put them in the ghettos. Like, that's what they were called. Not being disrespectful. That's what they were called. And then just slowly started taking more and more and more and more, and then exterminated them.
yep.
And this one went, yeah, I already knew who I was coming into this. It's just been fun having this God King kind of figure it out.
Right.
And so this story, I mean, I agree. Every time I've heard it, I'm a little disgusted. So we have to take the perspective of the sacrifice through her eyes.
Yeah.
Because if we
Right.
don't, then she's a stupid, naive girl that
Yeah.
didn't care, didn't know. That's not who she was. She was very
No.
knowledgeable stepping into that, going for my culture, for my people,
Yeah, and
for
her
Greece.
thought of what it would like, it doesn't not make sense. Like, yeah, it makes sense if with what she is thinking and uniting them by going over there and this happening. Yes, okay, I get it. It makes sense. You're yes, sacrificing something, but to gain what? So much more because now you're secure because you have
And
that whole other side of Greece.
And let's think about this too. A daughter wanting to raise her dad's, status, elevation, to bring honor. I mean, she's royalty and she's bringing honor to her father
Yeah.
by doing this as well. I think that's also a factor. Is
Yeah.
this is my father, I'm royalty, and our duties were a lot different back then.
Yeah.
Your duty to marry, your duty to some of them to learn
Yeah,
to give
especially being
themselves
a
to the
woman
church.
back then, they unfortunately they were almost used as a token, and that's all
They were
for the
essential
most
though.
part. They were
They
for
were
so many
essential because
things.
how old is the game of chess?
Yes.
And that queen is still foundational.
Foundationally, the strongest player.
And people always talk about how the king, he's useless. He can only have one move. The king only needs one move at a time. He's hugely significant. But the queen, your partner, they're putting in work.
Yeah.
They have to. That's their job. You do marry someone that helps you. You don't want to marry someone that you're constantly taking care of.
Exactly.
Right? And so the king bears a responsibility that if you fall, it's done. All these other people can fall. But the queen, when she's off the board, that's the main piece you try to get off the board.
Yeah,
You
because how
sacrifice
can
everyone
you
else to get rid of that queen.
Yeah,
Because the
makes it
king
easier.
is so much weaker without its queen.
Yeah.
The child doesn't play the same role as the queen. Their duties are a little bit easier to change, right? And so I just like to look at it through that one.
No, that's a great perspective, I think. It's spot on.
And then
Sure.
I believe that the fourth one is where that sacrifice of these divine beings, whatever they may be, is acknowledged and given back.
Right.
Right? So how we talked about earlier, it's not about the brutality. It's about we're honoring what you have done. And we don't deserve you. But here's how we will try to continue this harmony, this balance, this appreciation, this we are not as good as you. We do not have control and power. We are not as strong as the universe, as strong as the life here. We need you to help us. It was more of an acceptance to higher learning understanding, right? The paying attention to signs, paying attention to the flow of life, and knowing that death has purpose as well. Sacrifice has purpose. Yes, they were afraid that if they quit these things, their way of life was going to be destroyed. The sun was going to leave, the plants were going to turn on them, the animals would destroy them. And it worked. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it worked for a long time. So it wasn't just we killed people every so often. It was, ritual. It was continuous.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, I mean, you still see some of those buildings standing. Some of those temples are still there. And it wasn't just a ritual. I mean, look at the layouts of them. The sacred places are huge. They are huge. They did not mess around with their temples because
No.
and they still believed we are nothing. We are nothing compared to them, right? A lot of them. And
Yep.
yet we don't know how they built that. These primitive people, we don't know how they did it. And then people will be like, oh, yeah, we know how they did it. Okay, then do it again. Then do it
Right.
again
Right.
with the same technology that you're saying that they had. Look at how intricate their calendar was, how
Mm-hmm.
intricate their pottery was, their storage. Yeah.
There's stuff I was just watching on a video for the Why Files, the basement, and this guy, is it not Monto Picchu or
Machu Picchu.
Guchu Tempe, something like that.
Okay.
Whatever that is. But anyways, I forget what the exact word is, and I'm gonna sound foolish on the thing. But the areas they're looking in, like
Mhm.
they're digging down into the bedrock, these nice flat, smooth surfaces, and they're dating this stuff back to like 11, 12,000 years ago
Mhm.
or more back. And then it's got this sealant pretty much to where you got to heat it to like over 800 something degrees. It's like what the Romans did with their cement. And like, how did they do that? How did the Romans
Right.
heat it over 800 something degrees? That's pretty darn hot. Like,
Mm.
even for us nowadays, it's like hot. But then they made this sort of thing. So it's like, uh, holds water, like it's water resistant. And they're like looking back and they're like, but now they're finding more and more and more and more. They're like, but if we're right, this just keeps pushing things back and back, back and back.
Well, they worked smarter. We're sitting here going, we're superior. We have all this technology. We've been here for 2,000 years, and there were civilizations that were primitive, that were there for thousands and thousands to tens of thousands of years ago.
And they made an accidental discovery when they were doing this. Like, we don't do anything with purpose, but like him, they just happened to be there on the spring equinox, which, we just had. Um, they walked up on this certain spot and the sun just happened to shine because they went to a spot they weren't supposed to go. They were told, don't go because the political people, because they were digging up there,
Right.
they were like, stop, pretty much. They want them to stop at this point whenever this stuff was going on.
But the earth said otherwise.
So they went up there because they were like, you know what? This is when we're going to go. And then we'll be out of there before these other people show up and then we'll be good. Right. So because they just had to see it because they heard about it. So they go up. And because all of that other stuff forced them to go earlier, they were able to see something that was set up when this place was built. It was intended to exactly do this exact thing during the spring equinox for this year of 2026 or 25 when he went or whatever it was when they were looking at it. So it must have been 25 because it was last year.
Right.
But just how amazing is that? Like, just the chances of
Truly think that they worked smarter, not harder. I think that we are so flabbergasted because we work against nature.
I think they had divine knowledge and working with nature for sure.
Yeah, like we're seeing like a lot of the Egyptian pyramid pieces, how heavy they are. They were saying that they were floating them down the river.
Yeah.
And it's like, duh, what's the only thing that's going to make it any lighter? Water, right? So, and I don't know if that's true or not, but in my head, I'm like, that makes a lot more sense than we had 6 people dragging those pieces. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I've seen a thing where it shows giants doing it, but then there's talk and some things where you're looking at it where they use levitation.
The vibration, to levitate things.
Yeah, with using certain
I've seen
harmonic
some stuff with
frequencies
that.
and stuff, they're able to make things lighter and, not totally levitate, but it makes a 2-ton
It
brick
makes it
like
manageable.
10 pounds.
Yeah.
Like where you're able to just, here we go.
Because you change the frequency of the things around it so that it's easier to manipulate. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, they have the ability to do it. And what the stinker is we do too. We just don't, like, wherever that knowledge is hidden, we just don't have it.
Alexandria.
Man, how fun would it be to go back to that? Because then, yeah, it would change a lot. It would be fun to be able to go back to that.
It would be.
Maybe soon, sometime soon.
So with that, our daily thread today is, today we enter the sacrifice, where purpose is no longer abstract, but paid for. Christ chose alignment over escape, showing that sacrifice begins where avoidance ends. On Yggdrasil, Odin gave himself to himself, revealing that wisdom is born through what one is willing to lose. At Aulis, Iphigenia became the cost of movement, reminding us that some paths forward are not free. And in the world of the Meshika, sacrifice sustained existence itself, teaching that life is upheld through what is given, not just what is received. Each of these stories asks the same question: what are you willing to give for what you say matters? Sacrifice is not always dramatic, but it is always defining. It reveals what we value beyond comfort. What are you holding on to that your purpose is asking you to release? Meaning deepens when cost is fully acknowledged. And we may think that obviously we don't have some of these same sacrifices that these people had, but we do have a lot of sacrifices. You give something up to chase something else, right? A big thing for me was, giving up alcohol. I used to drink a lot when I was younger, and I've told you that I was like a heavy drinker. Stopped and I started losing more weight even too. But I told you I couldn't handle the mornings wasted, my head hurting, not having clarity, not being able or wanting to do anything. And so, yeah, was it fun? Did it help me socialize more? Yeah. But what was that doing for me as an individual? Not much. So you sacrifice certain things. Sometimes you have to sacrifice old friendships so that you can continue to grow in the way that you want as well. So we all do sacrifice things in one way or another. Sometimes we get the opportunity to choose and take our time. Other times we don't. But with that today, we are going to actually think about, what did I give? What have I given? Right? Not just what I've sacrificed, but what have I given on my journey? Okay. And then we're going to sit in silence for 3 minutes today without distraction. That's it. We're just going to sit in silence for 3 minutes without distraction. And then we're going to leave you guys with the thought that meaning deepens when cost is fully acknowledged. So when we fully acknowledge what it costs to become who we want to become, it doesn't mean that we're destined or that we will become it. But when we make those steps to give ourselves the opportunity, we have to acknowledge the cost that we've given up for it. But that's all that I have for today.
Awesome.
So we will see you guys tomorrow with something a little bit happier, with the victory.
Sweet. Thanks, guys. Love you. We'll see you tomorrow.